Welcome everybody to the first photo workshop with Raven. Today, what we're going to cover is going to be camera basics. Because I have a very firm belief that in order to do something well, you need to know how something works. So that's sort of where we're going with this today. So we're going to learn how do cameras work, basic camera settings, and basic camera modes. Now, some of this is going to apply to just cell phones, but most of it's going to apply to cell phones and DSLR and simple point and shoots. So how do cameras work? We're starting out with the DSLR and SLRs. So basically, and I wish I had my camera here to show you guys. So basically what happens whenever you have a DSLR is light comes in through here, hits the mirror, goes up into a prism, and that's what you see whenever you're actually looking through it. So what you see here, or what you see here, is actually what you see through here, which is different in a point and shoot, a general point and shoot camera, and actually a cell phone. Now, in order for the camera to take a picture, the mirror has to flip up, this opens up, and then this turns on. So the sensor in a DSLR is never on all the time, which is one of the reasons why the battery usually lasts for a month if you don't take a lot of photos. Because this is pretty much the only thing the battery powers other than the little analog display up here, which is about as technologically advanced as an 80 stopwatch. That's pretty much how that works. This flips up, this opens up, this turns on. Camera takes, displayed on the back of the LCD screen. Now, on your cell phone and point and shoot, little point and shoot cameras, and by point and shoot I mean like the little Kodak cameras that you can buy at like Costco, stuff like that. This is pretty much how they work. It's all the same. So you have your light here, it passes through here, goes to an optics board, a signal processing board, and the image sensor. And then it's displayed back here. Now you have a viewfinder, and like way back in like probably the 80s and early 90s, what you saw through here was slightly different than here because nowadays it's digital. Back then it isn't. Now it's digital. So what you see here is displayed up here on a smaller LCD screen. So, and this is also one of the reasons why the batteries, like if you accidentally leave your camera on and then your battery in your cell phone just goes bloop. That's why. Because this image sensor sucks battery life. It's the same in mirrorless, in the new mirrorless cameras that have come out now that are retardedly overpriced. So we have that. And then of course, you know, most of them have the nice LCD screens. So yeah, light comes in, hits all of this, talks to this. This is on the entire time and displayed here. Now, here's something that I've noticed is that in point and shoots and in cameras, it's been said that they take better photos in low light quality, which is true. And one of the reasons that they've talked about this is why is because the light has less room to travel. It's very short. I mean, our cell phones are not even an inch thick. So the light doesn't get distorted or degraded as it travels through there. But there's another reason for that, and we're about to get into that. So, basic camera settings. This is for your iPhone and your Android. So if you guys are watching right now, you can pull out your phone and you can actually kind of see some of this. So one of the modes that are on there that I think a lot of people probably are like, what the fuck is this? What is this? It's HDR mode. And HDR mode is actually, it's not new, but it's very new to cameras. Probably implemented about 3 years ago. And what it is, it's high dynamic range. It's the ratio of light to dark in a photograph. How does it work? What does it do? So HDR is the process of taking 3 photos at different exposures and then overlapping them. So if you guys have your cell phone and you notice if you have HDR mode on, sometimes it takes the camera, like the camera's delayed when it takes a picture. That's because your cell phone is actually doing that overlapping for you. So it takes one underexposed, so it's dark, one properly exposed, and then one that's whitewashed out. And then it overlaps them. So if you have a phone, guess what? It automatically does it for you. If you're a DSLR user like me, sucks to be you, because you have to do it manually and then do it in a photo processing. software. Although I think some cameras now actually will do it for you. I'm not sure. I know mine doesn't. So yeah, that sucks. No HDR work for me. Now, some other basic camera settings that we're going to talk about today, but we're probably going to get in, but I'm going to talk about a little bit more in depth later, is your, oh wait, no, I skipped a slide. So here's the difference with HDR. Like in the photo that we're actually raffling off today, I know like I shouldn't be talking about this right now, we'll clip this part, was done in HDR mode on the cell phone. So in HDR, this is the overlap. And that's why it's blue here. And you can see the light down here is because those 3 different photos overlapped enhances everything. That's why this is more detailed and everything just looks way more crisp. That HDR setting is those 3 photos that are overlapped. All right, so the other cell phone camera settings that I was talking about before I got ahead of myself that are normally in cell phones, it's panorama, macro, and portrait. Now, of course, you've also got video settings, but we're not going to be talking about video today. And to look at those, if you go to your camera, we'll do it together. If you go into your camera and you hit the little gearbox, because of all the different cell phones, like apparently they all have to be different and name it something different. Like mine is just camera modes. Some of them are smart modes, or I think some of them are just modes, depending on what you own. But you can go into edit modes. That's what I do. And then you can select and deselect which options you want on your camera. And some of you may have like way more than me. Like I've got like really crappy ones. So I'm probably going to be jealous. But if you want to share which ones you have, and if you have questions about any of those, let me know. Now, as far as portrait mode goes, we're going to be talking about that a little bit later when we get into DSLRs. So, basic DSLR camera settings and modes. This is where shit gets cray, all right? Because there's so much crap. But you always start off in your point and shoots in DSLR in auto mode. That is the beginner mode, the I don't want to think about what I'm doing mode. That is, I just want to take pictures mode. That's what it is. This is the general mode of most point and shoots. Now, this is great for if you're outdoors in well-lit areas. It's great in moderate shade, but it does not do well in low light or dimly lit interiors, and here's why. While most cameras are very smart nowadays, like very, very smart, if you've ever like half held down the shutter and you see that red light that comes out, that's the camera's internal light meter. And if it's really dark, like that light's not going to shine on anything, and it's not going to allow the camera to pick up points. So the camera gets confused and it's just going to be like, no, you'll hear it beep. Or it's going to turn on the flash and it's going to blind everything in front of you. So there's that. But the auto mode, auto sets the ISO, the shutter, the s-stop, and will determine if you require a flash, even if you feel like you don't need one. It's going to turn it on for you and you can't turn it off. So, oh, also, if you're shooting in auto and when you're out shooting in auto and you're just kind of getting used to your camera, I want you to pay attention to some of the settings that the camera has chosen, especially if you like the photo. So it's good to always walk around with like maybe one of those really small notebooks. Just keep it in your camera bag so you can write that down. And then once you get a little bit more comfortable and you decide you want to go into, say, manual mode, if you're feeling frisky, or either of these, you can set that up and play around that way. And this is pretty much what it's going to look like. So on the back of the camera, I can pretty much tell what this person's doing. This is not my hand because I haven't been able to take a photo of myself in like 2 weeks. So we see that they have like a shutter speed of 1.3, which is actually very, very slow. An aperture of 8, just how large the opening, how much light we're letting into the camera, and the ISO. Now we're all going to go more in depth in this on a later, like what all of this means in a later workshop. But these are the numbers that you need to pay attention to and write down. Like take notice, like if you're out on a sunny day and say it picks f8, shutter speed of 1/200th of a second, and your ISO is 100, write that down and be like, hey, super sunny day. Use these. And then that's a good starting point for whenever you get into more advanced modes. All right. Portrait mode. So, I know that some of you guys, especially if you have the iPhone and some of the Galaxy phones, you guys have portrait modes, or I think it's even called beauty portrait mode, or pretty face mode, pretty face mode, something like that. So this I'm talking to you guys as well. So what this is going to do whenever you're in a portrait mode is going to auto choose a shallow depth of field. So that means it's going to be a blurred background. So your subject's going to be in focus. You're going to have a blurred background, and more than likely it's going to turn on a flash. Now with DSLR cameras, even the pop-up flash is programmable. You can set it to how bright or how dim you want it. And this works really, really well in sunny, well-lit situations, light shade, and well-lit interiors. Now, why would it do a flash? Why would it do a flash? Well, one, like, especially if you're in shade, and I actually had this happen during a shoot, is that in shade, you're gonna get like those really weird shadows across a person's face that aren't very appealing. So if you do what's called a fill flash, is that it's gonna light the person's face, it's gonna get rid of those shadows, but still give you that really nice shade lighting. Because you know, sometimes sunlight's very harsh. Makes you look washed out, things like that. So that's it's gonna fill that in for you. So if you're using this mode, here's the thing that you don't want to do. Is that you don't want to be all up in their face. Like, you really do not want to be like this close and be like, hey, let me take your picture. Don't do that. All right, take at least a good 3 to 5 normal steps away from the person and then do it, because that's gonna wash the person's skin out. But at the same time, you don't want to be across the room, because then your fill flash is not going to work as well, especially if you're using a cell phone. That flash is going to be useless. And then of course you can zoom in and out as desired. All right. So landscape mode, my favorite. This is my favorite. All right. So with landscape mode, it auto chooses an aperture that's going to create an equally focused foreground and background. So everything's going to be in focus. So, and of course, for some of you, know that that's very important. If you're, especially like, maybe if you're in Alaska, you want to see what's going on here. Maybe you want to see the mountains in the back. Okay, you want your polar bear in focus, and you also want everything behind the polar bear in focus. Okay, so this is the mode for you. And some camera phones also have a landscape mode, or generally I think most cameras probably already in landscape mode. That's their auto mode. But it works well in bright sunlight and slightly overcast days. Does not work well indoors unless it's a very, very well lit room. Why? Because the aperture, aka the opening that allows the light in, is going to be very small. So think of like a pinhole, versus if you're doing portrait, it's like the size of a straw or an eraser. This is going to be a pinhole. So it works best when it's zoomed out completely. Why? Well, because you're doing landscape, all right? If you want to take a picture of a pretty flower, we're going to tell you the mode for you, but it's not landscape mode. All right, so if you're doing landscape, zoom out all the way. Smallest number on your lens, okay? Now, for those of you who like to take pretty flower photos, this is the mode for you, macro mode. Usually has the flower. I think on some of the Galaxy phones, you can see, like I think on mine, it's got like 2 trees for landscape, 1 tree for macro. And that's where it auto zooms it in. So macro mode is for anything smaller than your hand. So like even whenever you go to those salon ladies and you see them like doing this and they're just like, and you see it's just nails and it's the nail polish, that's considered macro mode. This is what generally most product photography is considered macro. So it's super close up, so ladybugs, flowers, things like that. It works ideally on prime lenses of 50mm, 100mm, and 160mm. Prime means it doesn't zoom in or out. This mode's also ideal for bright sunny days and well-lit interiors. Why are you saying everything's only for well-lit interiors? Because that's when you get the best photos, okay? Just saying. We'll get into low light situations later on down the line. But if you have a zoom lens, especially nowadays with the way glass is made and stuff like that, you can still do really good macro photography. So don't fear. I want to say most general DSLR packages usually come with 1 or 2 lenses. So yeah, you can definitely play with that. Just know that depending on, like this one with a at 50 millimeters, and you can see that on the numbers of your lens. You can see it's usually 13 to 75 is the basic. Set it to 50, and it's going to allow you to get closer. This one means you're going to have to be farther away, even further away. Otherwise, it's going to be blurred. Camera can't focus, and you really don't want a manual focus if at all possible. All right. So we're going to get into these slightly bracketed ones just to talk about them so you know what they are. But we're not going to be playing with them at all right now. We're going to get into these a little bit later. So this is Aperture Priority, and this is what was being used in the photo previously. When we're talking about, you know, pay attention to what's behind you. And this allows you to set the aperture size. So whether you want a pinhole opening or you want it wide open. And what the camera's going to do is it's going to calculate everything else for you. So I think, well, you take that back. You can actually set up the ISO as well. So this is pretty much good if you want to play around with like depth of field, things like that. Do you want a super in-focused one? Do you want a super blurred out background? This is a really good one to play in. So, but here's the only problem with that, and this is something that you need to be careful of. With Aperture Priority, because it does select your shutter speed for you, it can drop below the threshold of hand-holding. And usually the threshold of hand-holding is 1/80th of a second for a basic lens. Now, if you have a longer lens, it's going to be much higher. It's usually like 1/100th. Because our hands, regardless of what we think, our hands shake constantly, we constantly move. So we can't, it makes it very hard for us to stay that still and not get motion blur. So just be mindful of that. And then we have shutter priority. So this is the opposite. This is where you set your shutter speed. And I actually use this a lot when I do weddings. Mainly because, or either of these is actually really good. But shutter priority is really great if you've got ever-changing situations or light situations, such as a wedding, because they like to dim the lights, bring the lights up, dim the lights, bring the lights up. And it's really hard to go back and forth in manual mode when there's so many things happening. So shutter priority is great. I want to be able to freeze time, no motion blur, and everything still be well lit. So this is where you do that. You can freeze them. And as again, they're good for pets, events, etc., stuff like that. Now here, this can be a little bit difficult for first-time users because it's hard to know when, what is that setting that freezes time? What is that if you want that motion blur, when does that happen? And we'll get into that later as well. But just know, even though your camera is smart, it does make mistakes, and this one, it tends to make a few more mistakes in. So just be aware. And then we got manual mode. So this is the one where, I love this. You're not a real photographer if you're not shooting in manual mode. Dude, shut up. Shut up. All right? Manual mode is not for the faint of heart. Okay? It is not for the faint of heart. This is where you control everything. You control the shutter, you control the aperture, you control the ISO, you control everything. And it can be very, very frustrating if you don't understand how everything works, which is something I'm going to teach you. It's going to be a little bit later because I'm not going to dump everything on you at one time. But this is something that can be very frustrating and make you want to throw your camera across the room. But once you do learn basics and you want to try to be creative, this is where you can create some absolutely stunning photographs using manual modes. So we're going to get to that. Don't be frightened of it. Just know that it might not be right for you right now. So yeah, and that's why I want you to play around and write down, like if you're shooting in auto mode, write down what you see in the back, because you can plug that in here and try to recreate that lighting in that photo. So that's why we want to do that, because it sort of starts to click as like, okay, I know if I do this and that, but do these things together, that's what I get this. Well, what happens if I change this a little bit? How does that change? So yeah, we're going to get into that a little bit later. All right. So I've given you guys a lot of stuff. I feel like I've given a lot of information to you about your cameras and about your cell phones and how to use different modes. And I don't want to dump too much on you. But here's something that I'd like you to do. I'd like you to go out and take 3 different photographs using the different modes in your camera. Whether it's cell phone or your point and shoot or your DSLR. For you cell phone users, turn your HDR off. No cheating. No editing. So don't be putting it in your little photo editing mode and be like, look what I did. No, I want to see what you do. And then I want you to post them in our Discord. All right. And if you want access to our Discord, you can find us online at Twitch. Twitch.tv/TheRavensCall.